Hi members, another behind the scenes look at sometimes the pain in the ass that is my life. I have this Troy built Mustang 50 inch, which is actually a pretty good machine in my opinion. It's well built, it's strong, it's got a Briggs on it, a 24 horse twin on it. And the problem that the owner is having with it took me a while to be able to repeat. The engine runs just fine, and when you turn on the PTO clutch, sometimes it doesn't want to engage. Half the time it takes forever to spin up to speed, and half the time it stalls the motor. So I've checked everything. You can see that this thing's been taken apart. The side, one side is laying over there in the yard, the other side's laying over there. I got engine parts down here at my feet. I pulled everything apart on this thing. I replaced the carburetor in case it was having some sort of a motor issue. I pulled the spark plugs and checked the compression on both cylinders. They are at 170, and they're both the same within, if I remember correctly, within 4 psi of each other. So they're excellent. I've checked the magnetos for spark. I let this thing run for 45 minutes to make sure that the magnetos weren't failing after a while. And what I realized with so much testing was that in order to repeat the problem, sometimes I would cut my own grass with it, and at the end of cutting the grass, it would start to fail. And I finally got it to the point where when I turn on the machine, which I can't do for you now, and then I turn on the blades and I wait a minute for them to spin up, I can move slowly forward, but the right hand stick seems to make the machine want to shut off half the time, the PTO shut off. And if I jam both sticks forward and go as fast as I can across the yard, by the time I get from this side of my yard to that side of my yard, the engine stalls, and most of the time I can't even shut off the blades to fix it. I have to restart the motor. So I've checked everything mechanically that I can find on this thing, and everything's leading to an electrical issue. So I've taken this thing apart, and I just wanted to give you guys a quick peek that right there, buried up there in the front, is a safety switch. We got a safety switch here. I got another safety switch here and here. There's a safety switch on the seat, and there's another safety switch buried underneath of the motor. In order to get this thing off, I've had to take off the seat. I had to take off both side cowlings. That's what these are. One of them has the PTO switch, the clutch, the throttle. Had to disconnect all that stuff just to get that off. Then I had to take this plate off, which bolts down onto the frame here, including the springs for the seat. Take the seat off. And then in order to get this plate off, I actually had to cut. Right here, there was a little skinny piece of metal. They had just stamped out the hole. And I couldn't get all of the armature gear to go through that little hole, so I took a grinder and I sliced off the little piece on both sides so I could get that plate out of the way. And I had to literally do all of that because after having this thing for so long and not being able to figure out exactly what it is, testing switches, looking for diodes in the wiring harness, the owner really needs to cut his grass. And he said, well, what can we do to get this done quickly and easily? And the bottom line is we're going to remove the entire wiring to this motor, which is only going to take me about 10 minutes because all I'm going to do is cut all the wiring out. And we're going to bypass every safety switch and diode on this thing. I'm literally going to run wires from the battery to the key, and from the key back to the starter. I'm going to run power wires from the alternator to the battery for the charging system. I've got to run a 12 volt line down to the fuel solenoid on the carburetor, and I've got to run a kill wire to the 2 magnetos. And then I have to run a power wire up to the PTO switch and back down to the PTO. And that might sound like a lot. It's really not. I'm not going to film it. That's why this is a behind the scenes video. But I'm letting you know that sometimes you dig into a machine. I've probably spent 16, 18 hours over the course of several days trying to figure out what is wrong with this thing, and I just can't figure it out. Now what you can do is replace the safety switches one by one, because they're all testing fine. When you close them or open them, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to. When I put power to the PTO clutch, you can hear the magnet clicking in place, and when you take the power away, you can hear it click off. I cannot find what the fault is. I cannot find any issues with the motor losing compression, not having power. Both cylinders are working perfectly. So in order to sort of bypass all this bullshit, I'm taking all the wiring harnesses out. We're going to wire this thing directly one at a time, and hopefully that means that we bypass the whole problem, because at this point the only other thing that keeps smacking me in the back of the head is I wonder if there's something wrong with the PTO clutch. Now the PTO clutch is just a magnet. It's an electromagnet. You put power to it, the magnet hits against the clutch, makes it spin, makes your blade spin. When you let it go, it lets go, and it lets it spin freely without turning the blades. I don't know if it's drawing too much power, if it's shorted on the inside, if something like that happened. And I hate to have to come to this guy and say, listen, I rewired the whole thing and we're still having the same problem. I can't find any faults with your PTO clutch, but let's replace it for $200. So sometimes even us guys that have worked on these things for decades come across some shit that just doesn't make sense. I've spent countless hours on YouTube trying to find any kind of videos I could talking about this subject. No one's ever done a video on this, and that's going to include me, because I don't have time to film this thing at this point. I'm literally going to get in there and rip all these wires out, run straight wires directly to the things that I need to work, so this thing will do the basics. And we're going to go from there. I'm going to test it out, see if the fault comes back. If it does, the only thing left is going to be that PTO clutch. And God, I hope that's not the case. But I just thought you guys might want to know what I do behind the scenes. If anybody that's a member does want to know what happened to this thing, feel free to just leave me a comment, and I'll let you know how it come out in the end. Thanks for being a member. Thanks for helping me out. Because I can tell you right now, I put a new belt on this thing, which was 80 bucks. I put a new carburetor on this thing, which was 80 bucks. I put a new fuel pump on this thing, which was 25 bucks. I put that out of my own pocket. I'm broke as hell, and I put all that money out of my own pocket. Now he'll pay me back for that if I can get this thing running and get rid of this fault. And I'm charging him 40 bucks for labor for several weeks of bullshit. So you're not going to become rich doing this. I do this because I try to help other people learn how to save themselves money and fix their own machines. So thank you so much for being a member. I appreciate you all, and I'll see you soon.